the United States Congress could take up, which is about the fundamental right to vote in our country. And I think it is clear, certainly for the American people, that when we're talking about the right to vote, it is not a Republican concern or a Democratic concern. It is an American concern. This is about the American people's right to vote, unfettered. It is about their access to the right to vote in a meaningful way. Because nobody is debating, I don't believe, whether all Americans have the right to vote. The issue here is there actual access to the voting process, or is that being impeded? And the bottom line is that the President and I are very clear. We support S1. We support the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. And the fight is not over.
All right, guys. So as you can see, that is Kamala Harris taking another L. Okay, taking another L. Because the Republicans have blocked the election reform bill, aka the Democrat takeover of elections bill in the Senate. Okay, and VP Harris, Vice President Harris, was even there to preside over the debate, because she was tapped by the Biden administration to take on yet another impossible assignment, an assignment that she cannot win, right? She can't win because the For the People Act was basically dead in the water, and Biden knew that when he gave her that assignment, right? He's just handing Kamala L's, okay? And so at this point, I doubt if Kamala will get one W as a win as vice president at this point. Okay, because again, she's taking L's on the border, and now she's taking L's on this. And this is a big deal because the voting rights thing is a huge issue with the Democrats, right? They really care about this a lot. They basically want to federalize elections. They want to essentially get rid of the Republican Party, right? Which is basically what this bill will probably do. Okay, to be quite honest with you. And this is why they want to pass it. It is the nuke button on the Republican Party. It just is. Okay. So let's read a little bit more here about what's going on and the politics around this, because this could get interesting. Senate Republicans Tuesday blocked sweeping legislation on election and campaign finance reforms that Democrats said is crucial to ensuring voting rights and saving democracy, but the GOP blasted as a partisan power grab. So I just want to be clear with you guys on my position on this bill. I disagree with the Democrats trying to essentially control how states run their elections, right? Federalize that. I think that is a power grab. I think that, you're giving the federal government more power than they actually should have, right? The states in the Constitution, the states have the ability to determine how they want to run their elections. And I don't think it's a good idea to have the federal government take over that process. I just don't. If the people don't like the elections process in their state, then they can vote, right? They can vote in those states and change that process. But according to Democrats, that's not possible because the right to vote is under attack, even though, again, they've failed to explain exactly who is being denied voting rights, who can't vote, right? They never say that. And at this point, they're in conspiracy territory with this stuff. But I will say, I do agree with the campaign finance reforms that the Democrats want. I do agree with that. Okay. And I don't like the fact that the Republicans are opposed to it. So that's for anybody that says, oh, you just agree with everything on the right and what the Republicans do. No, I actually don't. I actually do think that we need campaign finance reform. I want to get corporate money out of politics, or at the very least, have it be less influential. But that's not going to happen because McConnell is the king of money in politics. Okay. And for as much as Republicans and conservatives have been complaining about big corporations, right, them using their money and their woke influence, right, to influence politics, we should all be for that. But the Republican Party is not going to be for it because McConnell controls the legislation and he doesn't want it. And whatever McConnell says goes. That is why he is a king maker, right? He controls the legislation, as I has explained to you guys, for a long time now. The For the People Act needed 60 votes to clear a procedural vote in the Senate Tuesday, but Republicans filibustered and killed the legislation from advancing to debate. No Republicans joined with the 50 Democrats on the motion to proceed. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell said Republicans won't stand for the Democrats' attempt to impose new voting standards on states that would, quote, rig elections in their favor. He called the substance of the 900-page bill rotten to its core. Republicans took issue with imposing federal standards on state elections that they said would weaken state ID requirements. They also opposed starting a new public financing system for congressional elections and politicizing the Federal Elections Commission that enforces campaign finance laws. Okay, so like I said, I agree with the Republicans on the issue of imposing federal standards on state elections, right? I 100% agree with them on that. What I don't agree with them on is the campaign finance stuff, because I do think we should have a public financing system, right? I actually read some of the bill, and it calls for a voucher system, like a public matching system that I agree with, because it would make the voice of the people heard a lot more than the voice of these woke corporations, okay? So, again, I'm not with the Republicans on the campaign finance stuff, okay? I think that's where I draw the line with them. But I do agree with them on, being against imposing federal standards on state elections. Even GOP moderate Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska said she couldn't support the bipartisan federal takeover of the election system. In a floor speech, she said she backed elements of the bill and will co-sponsor the separate John Lewis Voting Rights Act, but cannot back the Democrats' one-size-fits-all reforms. Okay, so the John Lewis Voting Rights Act is a narrower piece of legislation that basically strengthens the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Okay. So I think that probably has a better chance of getting some traction, right? Which is why Kamala said they're moved on to that. Okay. Because they know that this current bill that they have is dead in the water. Like it's not going anywhere. They now have to focus on a narrow piece of legislation. Okay. And I honestly agree with that, because I don't like these big one size fits all bills. And I don't know why Congress likes doing this, right? They love doing this thing where they want to pass these huge bills that are like 900 pages, thousands of pages. Like, the public is not going to read that. We don't know what's actually in the bill. Like, what are in these bills, right? They're so long. And obviously, they have a lot of corporate influence. They have a lot of lobbyist influence. They have a lot of earmarks. They have all types of things and pork in these bills that the public just is not going to know about because they're so large. Okay. And for the life of me, again, I can't understand why they're so gun-ho on doing this when you don't have that much time in Congress. Why don't you guys come together and agree on things that you both agree on, make that the legislation, and pass it, right? Like, I don't understand why they don't do that. I really don't. Now, Joe Manchin, whom, a lot of the progressives are pissed off with, right? Him and Kyrsten Sinema, he did try to come to a bipartisan agreement, with the Republicans in regards to the For the People Act, but the Republicans weren't going for his compromise legislation either. Okay, so it's basically just dead in the water. Now, speaking of Kyrsten Sinema, the For the People Act being blocked by the Republicans, that has now re-energized the progressives to call to get rid of filibuster, because they're saying that the Republicans are not interested in democracy. They're not interested in working with the Democrats at all. We just need to get rid of the filibuster. Okay, and the only thing that is standing in the way of them getting rid of the filibuster is Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, and also Joe Biden, right? Because Joe Biden is not putting any pressure on them at all, really, to get rid of the filibuster. But the progressives don't know that, or they don't realize that, because all eyes are on Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, which is exactly what Joe Biden wants, in my opinion. So let's read a little bit more here, because Kyrsten Sinema seems to be holding strong in her position against getting rid of the filibuster. Arizona Democratic Senator Kyrsten Sinema reaffirmed her opposition to abolishing the 60-vote Senate filibuster, rebuffing progressives who have decried the legislative rule and called for its removal. Sinema argued that scrapping the Senate rule would erode democracy guardrails, writing in the Washington Post that doing so would lead to the nation to lose much more than we gain. Quote, "It's no secret that I oppose eliminating the Senate's 60-vote threshold," Sinema wrote. I held the same view during 3 terms in the U.S. House and said the same after I was elected to the Senate in 2018. If anyone expected me to reverse my position because my party now controls the Senate, they should know that my approach to legislating in Congress is the same, whether in the minority or the majority, she continued. Sinema also argued that the filibuster was essential to ensure moderation and compromise and a necessary safeguard against wild sweeping policy by the majority over and objections from the minority. Quote, it would be good for our country if we passed the For the People Act, only to see that legislation rescinded a few years from now and replaced by a nationwide voter ID law or restrictions on mail by voting in federal elections over the objections of the minority, she asked. Okay, this is actually an interesting argument for her, because essentially what she's saying is that, well, you guys know, we get rid of the filibuster and we pass the For the People Act. You know, if the Republicans happen to win and get back in the majority, they can just repeal it and then pass their own voter ID laws and restrictions that we're against. Which honestly, I think is a pretty solid argument. That's assuming that the Democrats don't go for a wholesale power grab, you know, after repealing the filibuster and making DC a state, and doing other things that essentially would ensure that the Democrats are never in a minority again. Okay? So, I mean, the assumption would be that the Democrats just stop at the filibuster. And I think that that's where she's kind of wrong here. But I do understand her argument that she's making. Okay? And I think her argument is solid in principle, in the sense that the pendulum swings the other way. If you get rid of the filibuster, essentially you're opening up the Republicans to do whatever they want in the future, which includes getting rid of what you just did, right? Having a filibuster there is a way to protect legislation that you have passed, that you have compromised on, okay? It's a way to ensure stability. It's a way to prevent wild swings in legislation, right? Imagine if they pass this bill, okay, the For the People Act, and they implemented all this stuff, right? Again, these are big, broad bills. This is why I'm against this stuff. Now, a few years later, if they repeal it, if the Republicans repeal it, then guess what? You just had major changes to voting in this country and campaign finance laws and all types of stuff in just a few years, right? That's not good for the country. So I strongly agree with Kyrsten Sinema here. Quote, would it be good for the country if we expanded healthcare access only to later see that legislation replaced by legislation dividing Medicaid into block grants, slashing earned Social Security and medical care benefits, or defunding women's reproductive services, she added. So essentially she's making an argument that, yeah, if you don't want all the things that we don't like from the Republicans, y'all might want to keep the filibuster. That's her argument. So at this point, guys, we're in an interesting situation politically. Nothing is happening, right? Obviously, but moving forward, it like I said, it seems like Joe Manchin, Kyrsten Sinema, and Kamala Harris are going to be the 3 scapegoats for Biden not really getting anything done. Okay, he can't get his infrastructure bill done. He can't get the voting rights thing done. He really can't get anything done at this point, right? He's not really doing anything, and I'm not sure, again, if Biden is cool with that or not, because he's not really pressing the issue, right? When you have 2 senators that are obstructing everything that you do, right, you would think that Biden would come out harder against them, but he's not. He's not. He's just sitting back like, oh, well, I guess it didn't work, right? And that's just kind of what he's doing. So, guys, listen, Joe Biden, his presidency honestly could effectively be over. He doesn't have that much time left. These legislators are always on break. Midterms are coming up next year. Okay, he has to focus on campaigning for that, you know, trying to keep the majority. And then after that, they got to focus on 2024. There's not that much time left, right? So Joe Biden's presidency at this point could effectively just be over, right? Because they don't have time. They can't get Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema in line. And it looks like Kamala is probably going to take the blame for most of it, because Biden is basically making her responsible for all the things that he says he wants to do, but he really don't want to do. So we'll see what happens moving forward, but let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.